Good evening. Welcome to the second Inside Government show for tonight, brought to you by Cayuga Community College and shown on Spectrum, Verizon, Fios, as well as ARMA, the Auburn Regional Media Access, and Win 89.1, the college's radio station. I'm your host, Guy Cosentino. We are delighted to have back in the studio, again, the senator for the 48th Senate District here in New York, Rachel May, who represents all of Cayuga County, as we've talked about in the past. First time in a long time where one senator has represented the whole area. We've asked her on to give us an Albany update. We're going to talk about Kathy Hochul, the governor's proposed budget, the strike by New York State Corrections Department employees, as well as a bill that she is resubmitting to the legislature on bottle return, which is somewhat complex, but it's really interesting. So we've also got some viewer questions. Welcome back to the studio. Congratulations on your reelection.
Thank you, Guy.
So at budget season, I'm assuming that is all consuming. You had a town hall here 2 weeks ago at the college. You're going to be in Syracuse tonight for another one. You did one in Baldwinsville.
Right.
What are your constituents telling you, other than if they have a special interest and they want more money?
Well, that's typical. A lot of people want more money. We always hear from the school districts. We always hear from the highway superintendents. There are different groups that just depend on state funding in a big way, and we hear from them a lot. I would say the bulk of the people at my town halls have been very scared about what's going on at the federal level and how that's going to affect state funding and the services that they take for granted.
So we'll talk about that in a second. Let's do an overarching. This is a spending plan that's $252 billion with a B. If my math is correct, it's about $19 billion up from last year, which was already up $6 billion from the year before. What do you think about the general spending plan?
So we're able to spend this money because we had really good revenue last year, and because a few years ago we decided to tax the ultra wealthy, literally people making $10 million a year or more, at a higher rate, and that has brought in a significant amount of funding. So that
are there many people in the 48th Senate District who fall into that category?
There are 0 in the 48th.
And can you get data like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's really Manhattan, by and large, where
people who are working on Wall Street real estate areas like that.
Pretty much.
So what in the budget do you really like?
I do think we're delivering for K through 12 education this year. We met our obligations under foundation aid a few years ago, but we're continuing to increase. And we're, for example, we're going to be doing universal school breakfast and lunch, which is critical for kids who live in poverty and need to have the fuel to get through the day. It's really important for our schools.
And you represent a city, a large city, that has a very high poverty rate.
Highest in the country.
Okay.
Highest child poverty.
So let's go with school aid, then we'll come back to the rest of the budget. So how are school districts, in your view, making out in the budget? Because we had Misty Slavic, the superintendent of schools, here last week. I'll get into her issues, but overall, districts happy?
Generally, yeah. I mean, there's a change to the way the foundation aid formula has been applied, but
it hasn't been fixed in the sense
it has not been
overhauled.
fixed, but certain things have been updated. So some of the districts that have higher poverty than they had in the 2000 census will be getting more funds. And we made sure that, for example, the rural districts that have had decreases in student population aren't getting cut this year. In fact, everybody's going to get either a 2 or 3% increase at the very least.
So Auburn is now on an aid front, has had 5 years of increases, substantial increases, but the formula hasn't been fixed. Do you see that on the short-term horizon?
You know, there are so many conversations about it. The problem is that if you truly fix the formula, there are districts that will get significant cuts because over time, the formula was doling out money to districts that really didn't need it.
High wealth districts.
Yeah. And no elected official wants to have districts in their
So the only
election
practical
district
way, and
be
this is a
cut.
horrible way to say it, is just to shoot a lot more money into it, fix the formula, and those high wealth districts are even going to may make out better, but the districts like Auburn will catch up.
Right. I mean, yeah, it's not ideal, but it's probably the way we have to do it. Auburn started from one of the lowest points in terms of per student spending, so I'm glad that they've gotten significant increases.
And rural districts in your area are okay, because I know some Cayuga County districts were not happy with the increase. They're happy about an increase, but not as much.
Right. I mean, no one's ever completely happy with what they get, but a district
But
that
Albany
is
is
losing
such a happy place.
a district that's losing population is not going to lose money this year, and that is pretty critical because they can't, you can't cut at a teacher if you've lost 5 students. You still need all the teachers that you have.
So one last question on the school aid piece, and then we'll go back to the general budget. Traditionally, the legislature, especially in election years, and this is not one, add money to school budgets. Do you see, because there's been such an increase under Governor Hochul's proposal, do you see the legislature adding more money in for schools?
Yes, probably mostly to make up for, there was, the formula change ended up with a large cut for New York City, and it didn't make sense that New York City should get a big cut, so I think we will add.
So it may not be
money
for
back
upstate
to
districts, but for
Probably not.
anything in the budget you don't like?
Well, there are certainly things that we're fighting for, like the governor put $200 million in for the new emergency room at Upstate Hospital. They need 450, and so I've been fighting really hard to try to get that additional money.
Do you see the
in.
legislature putting something like that in?
I think we will. I think we'll at least get close to that. So yeah.
So traditionally, not traditionally, the law is that April 1st the budget should be adopted. That's about 25 days from today. Do you think you're on track for that?
I do, actually. I feel like we're moving faster than we have in recent years. And there are 2 reasons for that. One is we have more money than we...
It's always easier when you have more money.
It's always easier. But the other reason is that the governor made the decision not to claw a lot of things back. Typically, the governor puts certain amounts in that presuppose that the legislature is going to bargain to get more there. And a lot of the things that we typically have to fight for, she just put the money in up front. So we don't have to have those fights. We can concentrate on the few, really critical areas.
Is April 1st important, though? Or is it just symbolic?
No, it's very important. The school districts have to come up with their budgets very shortly after that, and if they don't know what they're getting, it's almost impossible for them to make good decisions. And the old budget ends March 31st, so at the very least we have to do a continuing resolution of some kind to keep people getting their paychecks.
So you have at least 2 cities in your district, and they are looking back at history and saying we're not getting as much aid and incentives for municipal programs, AIM, but that is up, but it's not to the level they would like to be. Same with reimbursements for things like the arterial and items of that. Where do cities stand in this budget? They don't get to be talked about as much as, let's say, school districts.
Right. So the AIM funding is funding that goes to every municipality by a formula, and it's really important funding, partly because there aren't a lot of strings attached. They can really do with it what they need to. But under Governor Cuomo, that money did not increase at all for 16 years or something like that.
Yeah.
So we put in the first ever increase last year, And I was the one who spearheaded that. I fought really hard for it. It wasn't a huge increase. It didn't keep up with all of the inflationary pressures over all of that time from the beginning, but it was an increase. And I don't know if we will get another increase this year, but we're trying to.
How about for reimbursement for state roads, which I think goes back to the last increase was 1987?
Yeah,
which is a long time ago.
Well, yes and no. I mean, CHIPS funding, there's CHIPS funding, which is, again, kind of unrestricted aid. There is the touring routes money, which is for cities that have state roads and touring roads that go through them. There is the bridge, New York, which is for bridges and culverts.
So it may not be necessary for arterial, but
right.
there's others.
And the
funds.
touring routes money is pretty new money it's only been there for a few years. So there have been increases that have happened. But you're right, and certainly not anything catching up with inflation. So I met with the highway supervisors just day before yesterday, I can't keep track anymore. Albany, everything moves fast. But we know what they want. We're going to be fighting. We haven't talked about the transportation part of the Senate one House budget yet. So we'll see what gets in there.
And in the past, there's been criticism. This started with Governor Patterson because of a court decision. The governors can put policy in the budget. Is there a lot of policy? I know there's some, but is there anything that bothers you on the policy side that Governor Hochul has put in her budget?
Yeah, she's trying to reform the discovery laws that we changed a few years ago.
This is for courts.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I get that there are some real issues there, but I feel like it's a solution in search of a problem in some ways, like it goes way, way too far. So that's one that we're going to have to fight out. I wish she had put the cap and invest in the budget, but she didn't. So there are things that we have to fight.
What's cap and invest? I'm sorry.
It's a mechanism for paying for some of the climate investments that we are already making and need to make in the future.
So this is going to be about trickle-down economics of sorts. So a lot of things are coming out of Washington. We're getting bombarded not by the day, but by the hour,
right?
Whether it's tariffs or other things, and we'll get to Micron in a moment. But let's talk about trickle-down in the sense of things may not trickle down at all as the federal government starts with DOGE, starts cutting things. How concerned are you, I know some of your constituents are, but how concerned are you about decisions that are being made at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue impacting Albany's budget, short-term and long-term?
I am deeply concerned, but we have to make our budget by April 1st, and we really don't know. We're doing it in this aura of uncertainty that makes everything harder.
Are there things that you should be doing now, making some tough choices now, because at some point some of this is going to occur? Whether it gets through the courts or not, that's a different issue.
Yeah, well, that's a really hard question, because we don't want to say, okay, we're going to go ahead and pay for 100% of school lunches. A lot of that money typically has come from the federal government. If we just say, okay, we're going to pay for that now, then it's guaranteed they're going to cut the money from us. So we don't want to negotiate against ourselves ahead of time, right? We want to do what's right for New York State. Fortunately, we have budgeted wisely for the last many years and put a lot of money in the rainy day funds that we have, so that if we have to come back and say, here's a gap we have to fill, we can fill it. I mean, up to a point. We get about $90 billion typically per year from the federal government for various things, and we can't fill a hole that big.
But do you do believe you will see a cut there? Whether they will be legal and occur is a different issue, but you do see cuts coming down where you will be told you're not getting that amount of money.
I mean, yeah, I think so. I think school lunches are an example. There's a lot of fear about funding for, if he cuts the Department of Education, will the funding for a lot of special education in our schools could go away.
So another Washington question that was not, somewhat was on my list on Monday, but really hit my list about 9:45 on Tuesday night is Micron. So the president has suggested that the CHIPS Act should be revoked. What I was most interested in was not what the president said, but what the speaker was doing behind him. Because the speaker was here campaigning for Brandon Williams back in October. Yeah. He was asked a question about something the president said on Joe Rogan. He agreed with that, and then Brandon Williams got him to turn around saying, we're not revoking the CHIPS Act. I saw the Speaker of the House nodding his head during the president's comments about chips. How worried are you about the federal government removing its support from Micron?
I mean, I'm worried. I'm worried about everything, but that was a new one that kind of came out of left field for us on Tuesday. A lot of the progress we've made, a lot of the plans we have, and a lot of the excitement that we've seen in this area for increased manufacturing, increased population, all of the things, has depended on a reliable federal partner. And right now we have a federal government that is absolutely not just unreliable, but in utter chaos and trying in every way to make people not be able to trust it. And so I don't know what we do.
Okay, so County Executive Ryan McMahon was quick to get out there yesterday and say something. And there were two salient things that I thought were interesting. One was he thinks, besides it being a political speech, which I was very interested to hear him say that, was that it is likely if there is a change to the CHIPS Act, it's for projects in the future, not for what is currently agreed to with the Department of Commerce. The second one is he counts votes. And he says, you got Idaho, for example, you're not going to get the 60 votes you need in the Senate. No Democrat in the Senate is going to support revoking this Biden administration piece, and then you're going to also lose some Republicans because it's helping their districts. Does that make sense to you on those 2 points?
Well, we haven't seen a lot of Republicans who have a spine to stand up to this president, and so I will believe it when I see it. But I would say more than that, when you've got a federal government that is sowing uncertainty, that is telegraphing that it is unreliable in every way as a partner, you're going to start seeing business investors take their investments to other countries because they don't trust the United States, just the way we're seeing our former allies in Europe feeling like we can't trust America anymore. I feel like every time he does this, even if he walks it back, even if we, as he's done with a number of other things, a number of other cuts that have been walked back the next day, or the tariffs on automobiles, it sows a level of uncertainty that then makes it far harder for us to do the business.
I have a couple of investment advisors I know who all just think, I'm worried they're going to end up in the hospital with just whiplash.
Yeah, and if you can't run a government that way and expect people to be reliable partners with you if you're not a reliable partner with them. So I think probably we will pull this off. I think we will be able to keep the investments that we need to make this happen.
But it will be helpful to have shovels in the ground by the fall.
Right, but also we were depending on lots of other companies to be coming here as satellites to Micron. I don't know if this throws that into jeopardy because they're going to say, I'd rather be, in Japan or wherever. I am very worried about that.
So while Micron's in the news in the last 48 hours, what has tended to consume the central New York media over the last couple of days last couple of weeks has been this issue with the corrections officers. In your view, we'll break it out in pieces because there's workplace items, there's the HALT issue. We'll deal with all those. In general, what do you see as the issue of this labor strike? And you consider it a strike, correct?
I do.
Okay. So what's the main issues as you see them?
Well, I believe them when they say workplace safety is a real concern. And I completely understand that. I also think there is obviously some deep disagreement between the labor leadership in
Within NYSCOBA and
yeah.
the Wildcatters are
Right.
not on the same page either.
Right.
Okay.
So there's that. I don't think it's a coincidence that the strike pretty much coincided with the charging of officers in
So the Robert Brooks,
killing
and
of
then
Robert
this week we
Brooks.
had, I
Right.
don't think I'm pronouncing his name right, and I apologize.
Messiah.
Messiah Nativi?
Yeah, I'm
sorry.
not sure how
So in that case, that was several corrections officers were suspended there. In fact, Governor Hochul fired several. And then this week, with what occurred across the street from Marcy, 11 employees were placed on leave. What has your conference been told about both of those incidents, by the way? Or have they not?
We don't have information that you don't have about them at
Do you
this
think it was
point.
right to charge those in the Robert Brooks?
Absolutely.
Okay.
With
So,
this other one, we're not going to have the video footage. It's going to be a little bit harder, but
okay, so I want to take little bits and pieces of the striking issue. First of all, have you met with the strikers?
no.
Okay. Any plans to do so?
No, but my understanding is that they're starting to head back to work, and we're seeing
But some are being,
dwindling numbers.
okay,
out
but
there.
some are going to lose their jobs and some have lost their health insurance.
Some. It was a small number the last I
Should they?
heard. Well, it's an illegal strike.
Okay.
The Taylor law, it matters. We've seen 7 people die in custody and lots of National Guards men and women be put in really hard positions.
Do you know how much
without-
this is costing the state at all?
The last I heard was for the first week it was about 25 million, but the estimate overall was more over $100 million.
So let's take pieces that I think I was a little bit surprised at when I read them. And again, the only thing I know is what Will Rogers said, what I read in the newspapers. So I was surprised that we don't do contraband screening in prisons. Any idea why not?
I don't know. I mean, that is definitely the kind of thing that we should be looking at and making sure that we are being a lot more careful. I think we do, but people can opt out of some of the
And the other one was
screening.
full body scan. So we were talking before, I was lucky enough to go to Florida a couple weeks ago. I had a full body scan at an airport. Why am I not having, not that I go to the prison, but why are we not doing full body scan? Is it a
So
money issue
what I
or a
understand
privacy
from
issue?
our chair of corrections is that you can opt not to get a full body scan, but then you get a search.
Okay.
So it's not like you just don't, they just wave you through. But I know when I visited the jail in Auburn that they were very concerned about being able to screen mail that was coming in. It's a dangerous job to be opening letters, that might have something in them. So they wanted a machine that could
At the
actually
county jail or
do it
the
for them.
prison?
The county jail.
County
So
jail.
just in general, this kind of thing, what comes in and goes out of a prison is we should be doing a better job.
Making this all more complex is this issue of the HALT Act. For those who don't know what the Humane Alternatives to Long-Term Solitary Confinement Act, called HALT, which is not how it's acronym, but what is that?
So the HALT Act was bringing New York State into compliance with international law about torture, basically, and saying effectively that you can't hold someone indefinitely in solitary confinement, putting limits on it, and if you were putting them long-term into some kind of special confinement, there had to be different standards about what that would be.
Do you think it should be changed?
I don't think overall it should be changed, but I can imagine that there would be tweaks that might make sense that would make things safer for.
So your counterparts in the Senate, the GOP, has said the governor should just arbitrarily halt it. Do you agree with that policy that the governor has, not whether it's halt, but the governor has the policy to just revoke laws?
I disagree with that. The governor, the negotiated settlement they tried to put in place involved a 90-day pause on HALT under emergency conditions, and I think she does have the right to do that.
Last items on the prison issue. The governor's also put in her budget closing 5 prisons across New York State. You have 2 in your district, at least 2 in your district. Is that good or bad?
Well, I think what part of the problem with the understaffing of our prisons is that we don't have that many people incarcerated as we used to. It makes sense to close some facilities and consolidate the staff. That's not easy on the staff because, you know, some of them would have to move, and that's no one wants to see that.
But you do see that as being a possibility.
I think we need
support.
I honestly think the Marcy facility ought to be closed at this point, but yeah.
Last question on this, because I want to go to the bottle bill before we finish, because it's interesting to me, is how does this all end?
It's really hard to see because they did a whole negotiation, but there's no clear leadership of who is striking with whom you can negotiate. So my understanding is there's a new negotiating table that includes a different collection of people who are going to try to resolve some of the issues of the culture of violence in the prisons, whether it is aimed at the staff or aimed at the incarcerated individuals, and really try to figure out how we can do better with our prisons in this state.
So for at least the second time in a row, you have proposed a bill to deal with the bottle bill that hasn't been changed in decades. What are you proposing overall, overarching?
Right. So the bottle bill was passed originally in 1983. It included a 5-cent deposit on certain beverages. Since then, there are a whole lot of beverages that we drink out of single-use bottles that we didn't drink in 1983, including water.
Well, but water is returned.
Water got put in 2009, but...
Well, we go through a lot of Gatorade in my house.
Sports drinks are not in there.
So is your legislation in pieces, is it to include things? So I thought I read you're including wine and liquor bottles. Am I correct or not?
We're trying to. That may fall away because there is a very strong lobby against it, but certainly sports drinks, iced tea, a lot of those things, and then raising the deposit to 10 cents because 5 cents.
And I thought when you were here, not this last time, but before when you spoke at a town hall meeting, you had said it's just the 1983 bill was so specific it didn't allow for growth to consider other options, correct?
Well, if I had been writing that bill in 1983, I would have done it by the container. I would have said everything that looks like this or looks like a can, because now you have to add every new type of thing that we drink to it, and it's very hard to
And are you looking to increase it from 5 cents to 10 cents?
5 cents to 10 cents, and to change the handling fee. This is absolutely crucial. So all of those redemption centers that are employers in very rural areas all over the state, they only get 3.5 cents per container.
And you think that should be increased to what?
They are closing by the day because they cannot stay open at that rate.
So what number would you have them reimburse
So
at?
our bill would raise it immediately to 5 cents, gradually to 6.5 cents.
And I don't know what happened last year. Where does it stand right now?
We have just introduced the bill, the new revised bill, and gotten a bill number on it. And it's not going to be in the budget, but we're going to fight to get it passed. And meanwhile, in the budget, we're going to try to get something to rescue the redemption centers.
So where did it get stalled last year? Did it just run out of time? It was an election year, a whole combination thereof?
Yeah, all of the above.
Okay.
We couldn't get a same as bill. We couldn't get a bill in the Assembly that looked like the bill in the Senate because the pressures were pushing in opposite directions.
30 minutes goes really quickly. I know you're on your way to a town hall at Upstate.
Yeah.
Good luck on that. But
you.
we want to thank you for coming to the college and giving us an update. Come back in a couple more months.
All right, my
after
pleasure.
the budget's done. But our guest has been Senator Rachel May, who represents all of Cayuga County and Skaneateles as well, which is in our viewing area. And thank you for being here right now. On Tuesday, our guest will be City Manager Jeff Dygert and Assistant City Manager Jennifer Haynes. As many of you know, Jennifer Haynes will become the new City Manager at the end of the spring, and we're going to have them in for a city update as well as a separate show with the YMCA's Bob Scarborough, who will be in with a representative of the Central New York Y to talk about what is going on there, including summer camps, which are always important here, especially on Owasco Lake. If you'd like to send us your ideas for questions or guests, you can send them at cozguytho@aol.com. I'm Guy Cosentino for Cayuga Community College. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you back here in the studio on Tuesday.